Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Piper Report. So, Pink Floyd bassist Roger Waters should be clarified that Pink Floyd no longer tours together. Roger Waters said during a concert how he believes the Syria chemical attack was indeed a false flag. Now, growing up, 7th grade to, now, Pink Floyd was my favorite band. I know all the members in there. I think they're all great, etc., etc. I also like the Beatles and Nirvana. Those are my top 3 bands. But anyways, I am happy he came out and said this. And some of the things he says, I completely agree with. And I think a lot of people agree with it. Now, I know, for instance, Nick Fuentes, he's basically saying that this is a good thing that Trump bombed him because the bombing didn't really affect anything. It was just a show of strength. And even if that is true to some regard, I don't think it is, but for the sake of argument, let's say that him bombing Syria was indeed good for everyone. It gave us an image of power, gave us all these things. Either way, a false flag happened to get us to do that. A false flag happened that instigated that attack. And that's a problem, because if it happens once, it can definitely happen again. And it doesn't just have to happen in Syria. It could happen anywhere. In the 1960s, members of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they wanted to actually bomb Americans and blame it on the Cubans to justify an invasion of Cuba. False flags have serious and dire consequences in the whole world. And this is 100% fact. I think it's important to really investigate issues before we come to conclusions. Just because an alleged chemical weapons attack happened in Syria doesn't mean the Syrian government was responsible. We know the rebels have also chemical weapons, and we know if they didn't, they can still get chemical weapons. During a solo concert this week in Barcelona, Pink Floyd bassist Roger Waters took a moment to address the audience about the recent bombing of Syria. Waters said he was approached by someone before the concert who wanted to get on stage and speak on behalf of the White Helmets about the alleged chemical attacks in Douma. So, I guess read this. Instead of bringing the anonymous man on stage, Waters addressed the crowd on the issue himself. The White Helmets is a fake organization that exists only to create propaganda for jihadists and terrorists, he said. That's my belief. We have opposing beliefs. If we were to listen to the propaganda of the White Helmets and others, we would be encouraged to encourage our governments to start dropping bombs on people in Syria. This would be a mistake of monumental proportions for us as human beings. I completely agree with that. Because one thing we know from toppling regimes is that the next type of government, the next group that supersedes it, is always worse. We saw this in Iraq. We saw this in Libya. It's a matter of life that when you take out a president or a dictator or just a leader in general, regardless if you don't like them or regardless if they still do bad things, removing them will only make it worse. So the question becomes, are you really in it for humanity or are you in it for your own interests? Well, my argument would be, what interest do we have in Syria? We don't. So the only way to actually justify the Syria strike would be if Assad himself was indeed killing his own people. And that is basically making policy based on emotion. So to circle back here, it's not worth it to take out Assad or the Syrian government because what replaces it will be worse. And Assad has a lot of support from the Syrian people, especially Christians, because he has been protecting Christians. I have watched a few interviews with Assad, and he seems like a genuine guy. Now, maybe looks are deceiving, but for instance, when you compare him to Saddam Hussein, just in manner and how they look, how their body movements are, you can differentiate between the two a lot. And supposedly, these two are synonymous with one another, according to the American government, the British government, and the French government. And it just doesn't make sense. I don't see it. A lot of people don't see it. So, we have to be careful to not induct policy based on false flags or anything that could be considered a false flag unless it is proven to be true. If it's not proven to be true, then we are in there for irregular means, and it only makes the situation worse. What we should do is go and persuade our governments not to go and drop bombs on people, and certainly not until we have done all the research that is necessary so that we would have a clear idea of what is really going on. Because we live in a world where propaganda seems to be more important than reality of what's going on. The White Helmets have been known to work with terrorists to achieve regime change in Syria. The White Helmets were also caught staging videos of atrocities in an attempt to bait Western powers into war and were later forced to apologize. Their group also came under fire last June when video surfaced that showed members assisting in disposing of the dead bodies of Syrian soldiers. The US-backed aid workers were seen celebrating their kill whilst holding the heads of the dead. As it stands, the White Helmets are heavily funded by the US and the UK, as well as many other international entities. That may be the reason they always worked in rebel-held areas of the greater Syrian conflict. The White House served as a de facto propaganda wing of the West to sway public opinion into supporting the regime change in Syria. So, I'm not going to read the whole thing. I will post the article, you can finish reading it, but it makes me happy that a member of one of my favorite bands, definitely my favorite band when I was younger, is calling out what is pellucid to most people, what is obvious to most people, that it was most likely a false flag attack. And again, to wrap things up, whether you agree or disagree with Trump's move, whether you think it helps strengthen the US, it makes us look tough, makes it look serious. Either way, we did it on an alleged chemical weapons attack. Now, whoever orchestrated that false flag knows they can do that in other countries because the US will jump on board. And that is a dangerous precedent to set. And I'm done.